Namaste and welcome. I am Swareena Singh and this is the Global Order. We are joined today by Ms. Rami Niranjan Desai. Among India's foremost experts, she is an author, anthropologist, and scholar specializing in the northeastern region of India, which, by the way, she has also widely traveled for her research. Ms. Desai, welcome to the Global Order.
Thank you very much, Swareena.
So, ma'am, you've warned that the instability in Afghanistan has forced illicit drug networks to rapidly relocate and even grow in Myanmar. How severely is this fueling addiction, HIV infections, and armed gangs inside our Northeast?
Swareena, after the ban of poppy cultivation by Taliban 2.0, which, and the ban has happened before, but this time they enforced it. Obviously, the supply chains were looking for a new home, so as to say, and Myanmar was in a state of conflict, and that became an easy supply route chain for them to shift to. Having said that, Myanmar since then has become a hub of not just poppy cultivation but also methamphetamine production, which is synthetic drugs. Synthetic drugs don't require the kind of the same sort of infrastructure that poppy cultivation does. So it doesn't require vast areas of land, it doesn't require water, it's not dependent on climate. So it's easier, it's less in a way risky, to produce. It can be produced in smaller labs. So the growth of illicit synthetic drugs in Myanmar has been exponential for the last couple of years. And that, of course, then has natural impacts on the borders around Myanmar and further. There's been methamphetamine shipments that have been caught in Japan as far as Australia. And of course, northeastern borders are 1,643 kilometers only with Myanmar. There's so much more with Bangladesh. There's the Bay of Bengal. These are all difficult borders in terms of it being porous. And this is also where the trafficking routes are. So it has an impact on India, specifically on India's northeast, which bears the most amount of impact of this sort of trafficking. So, I'd say that is of grave concern to us.
Right. And in addition to that, we also hear a lot about physical weapons coming across from the border. But you have called digital scams the next big frontier of destabilization. How are transnational cyber fraud networks operating out of fragile border zones, targeting Indian citizens, and to what end? And this is given in one of your interviews, you have spoken about your interview with, I think, three young men, Indian men who were there, one from Punjab and two from Bangalore, I think, who came back to India after their experience there. So, to what end is this happening and how is it functioning? If we can have a small discussion on that.
Um, Cyber scams, of course, again, are of huge concern to us because I think they impacted our economy in a very big way last year. And apart from that, there is the question of human trafficking as well. Myanmar has an area called Mayawadi, which is on the border of Thailand, which has emerged as a hub of cyber scam syndicates. Of course, Myanmar is not the only country. It's been well known that it is in Cambodia, Laos, so on and so forth. But Myanmar has become one of the bigger hubs post the crackdown of gambling units in northern Shan state in the Kokang area in Myanmar. All of this shifted to Mayawadi. Now, these are not like small mom and pop shops. They are big, well organized units, compounds that are run by syndicates. They have their own shopping areas, they have their own ATMs, they have their own theaters, they have their own pubs. You name it, it's like a mini city. Heavily guarded. And by most accounts of the NGOs that work on the border, it says that this is perhaps the only second to slavery in terms of human trafficking. At any given point of time, there are over 200,000 people there. But while we say this, we must recognize the fact that a lot of people, after being rescued, have gone back as well. And that tells us that not everybody is innocent. Some people may have been misled to enter these areas, these industries, but some of them are very well aware. Out of the people that I interviewed, one of them said clearly that he knew why he was going, and he was asked to do love scams. We are an English speaking country. It's easy to manipulate kids and say that, look, it's social media, it's in the English language, you can get good money, and some kids come because of that. Others know very well why they're coming, and therefore also because of the language comfort, and that being the medium that they reach out on social media to the people that they are scamming, it makes India vulnerable.
Right. And these are, as you've noted in the past, money-making businesses that fund insurgencies in the area. But shifting slightly, I think, towards the anthropological aspect of it.
Let me say something. I wouldn't really call it money-making businesses. Any illicit business has some connection to other illicit economies. So whether it's a conflict, whether it's arms trade, there is interconnectivity. So all illicit businesses you will find connected to each other.
Right. And I think that is what I'm trying to point out, that they fund each other, right? The illicit economies and the illicit businesses, when they fund each other, and that has a direct impact on the insurgency in the area, the unrest that is taking place in the area. But thank you for that. But also going further, I think, into a slightly anthropological aspect of it, if I can call it that. Like you mentioned, that there is the border, 1643 kilometers long, that India has with Myanmar, and we've begun scraping the free movement regime. Now, has this become too focused on security and too little on the people who live along the border? And can a border truly be secure if communities living across them see themselves as one people, if at all they do?
Look, first of all, you have to understand what the FMR is. It's not limiting people from moving across. So the question of any anxiety doesn't really come up. It was a 40-kilometer freeway between the boundaries many years ago, 50 years ago. Many years ago, it was changed to 16 kilometers. And now it's been shortened because of the conflict. But having said that, I think there is very little understanding and information about the boundaries itself. All the boundaries, at least in Myanmar, where the FMR is not transit routes. There are specific transit routes, and those transit routes, I don't think it is out of the ordinary for any country to say that there has to be some sort of surveillance on people moving in and out through those transit routes. Those transit routes also, which facilitate trade and age-old trans-ethnic ties, will not be how we are imagining it to be. It's not going to be physical fencing over 1643 kilometers. It is going to be an integrated surveillance system. So while some places will have physical fencing, the other places will not. And if you look at the places, and I've seen it by myself, where they've done some in Arunachal Pradesh, where they've done the initial fencing, anyway, nobody's crossing from those areas. One is just safeguarding your borders. The other places will have a mixture of surveillance, maybe drone surveillance, biometrics. It will be technically an integrated system. So I think it's very easy to misunderstand or have misinformation. And therefore, it's very important that people go deep into understanding why it's being done, how it's being done. Of course, maintaining traditional trans-ethnic ties is very, very important. That kind of freeway that people have. And if you've been on any of the borders, you'll see people have a permit who live in those areas and will be able to cross and do small businesses. So for small businesses, it is imperative to have some sort of free flow. But is that, what has been proposed by the government? Is it in lieu of national security, or national security, is trumping this? No, it isn't. It is, both of them are being looked at in a very measured and balanced way. Areas where we feel that insurgency permeates from, is going to be monitored. Maybe we'll have physical fencing. Where there are trade transit routes, we'll just have more surveillance in terms of biometrics. So, I see the hullabaloo about nothing. India is extremely cognizant of transnational ethnic ties. As a matter of fact, instead of focusing on this, I think it's very important for people to focus on the fact that India is also the first responder during any sort of disaster that has happened in the neighborhood. Whether, if you're talking about the FMR, then whether it was Operation Brahma, we ensured that humanitarian aid not only went to Yangon, but went to all the people of Myanmar that were desperately in the need of it. And that one must recognize as India's responsibility towards its neighborhood, and that it delivers over and above quicker without a transactional nature. So if India is that sensitive, then one must have more faith in their idea of the FMR.
Right. I think that's a rather important clarification and an important perspective to focus on. So thank you for that. I do have two more questions for you, but I think the important one is about the critical minerals, which you said is the new great game, and Northeast sits at the edge of it. With regards to foreign intervention in the region, are external global powers, specifically China, using local ethnic proxy dynamics to intentionally block India's access to these strategic resources? Or,
No, not at all.
right,
No, China is not interested in blocking any of. I mean, that's not that's not the conflict here. China has been a buyer of critical earth minerals from Myanmar way before anybody else even came into the game of critical earth minerals. They are the largest buyers. They are the largest processors. They buy 80 to 90. There's no question of they trying to block us because we haven't started buying from Myanmar. The reason we haven't started buying is because we don't have physical routes. We don't have physical routes. We don't have processing capabilities for that kind of volume that we're talking about. Also, we'll have to make roads. We'll have to have ways of bringing it in, and keeping in mind that mining of critical earth minerals has some amount of impact. Strategically, it's hugely important for India, and India, should really take this initiative to be able to cut a deal with Myanmar, to be able to break a deal with to be able to break this opportunity, have this opportunity with Myanmar where it can access its minerals. This time when President Min Aung Hlaing was in India, critical earth minerals was discussed. The extent of it, the viability of it, we don't know how deeply it was discussed, but it was discussed, and that's a very good sign for us. India does not look at it from the lens of China and what China is doing. India has to do its own thing. And hopefully, with what we have seen with the tariff wars between US and China, and then subsequently the announcement of Pax Silica, I think it's hugely important to understand that critical earth minerals is what is going to be where people's leverage is. So India will have to, have a very clear policy on it. And yes, I think the less we look at ourselves from the framework of what China is doing, the easier it is going to be for us to make our policies.
Right. Thank you for that. Um, I think for the closing question, I would like to ask you that given your expertise in the field and how much you've traveled, how much you've interacted in the region, do you think that there is a misconception that New Delhi may have about the region that you would like to address? Or is there something that you would wish that would be more discussed in the mainstream media with regards to the issues that we have discussed today?
Look, I don't think New Delhi is unaware about anything related to the neighborhood or to the rest of the world. This government has been an extremely neighborhood friendly government. We've had policies like our Neighborhood First policy, our Act East policy, something that was not even envisioned before. We have been very keen on securing our borders. National security has been a priority for us. And I say this with absolute certainty that they are aware because I have seen the difference in the Northeast. I haven't been traveling to the Northeast for the last 5 years or 3 years. It's been 25 years that I've been traveling to the Northeast on research. And I have seen the region change. There was a time when we couldn't go there. And feel safe. There used to be bomb blasts in Guwahati, let alone traveling to areas outside of Guwahati. There was no road infrastructure, there was no electricity, there was no safety. It was peppered with insurgent organizations, and nobody cared. Neither did the media cover it. Neither was there any scholarship interest. Neither was it a fashionable place to visit, even as a tourist. Because of the kind of infrastructural initiatives, we've almost doubled the amount of airports we have. We have almost 4 times we are working at the speed of building roads, highways than we have ever done before. Major insurgent groups have all been wiped out, whether it was ULFA, whether it was NSC. And sure, leadership might be across the border and they might be scattered, but does it have an impact on people's day-to-day lives? Are they operating within India's borders? No, they are not. So I think the Indian government does not need any advice, though I do think that the Indian polity does, in terms of the fact that while we are heavily invested and interested in the northwestern frontiers, I think it is important to look at the northeastern frontiers in the same way that we look at the rest of the country. It's important that we recognize that this is a crucial part of our country. And I say this of the common man, and probably the common man is not watching this podcast. They're not even interested in geopolitics, but that's what bothers me and upsets me, is that we still look at it as a very far away place, distant to us geographically, psychologically. We know nothing about it. We don't choose to travel there. We choose to travel to, some hotspots around India, which is great, like Goa or whatever, because they have the infrastructure, because they haven't had the problems that the Northeast has. But I think now it is high time that we make that our tourist destination. It's high time that we consciously say that, this is not just, a museum piece for us to go and say, oh, it's fashionable to go to the Northeast. But it's also a responsibility, because the more traffic that goes to the Northeast, the more that the Northeast benefits from us, the more it becomes psychologically evident to us in our mainstream consciousness, the more it benefits the people of the Northeast, and it benefits us in return. So I think these are little things that are very, very important. The government does not need any advice, but I think we have to somehow fulfill our civilian duty as well.
Absolutely. And I know I said one final question, but I can't help but ask you just one more thing. When we talk about people becoming aware, now the question about taking self-initiative and becoming informed is it's a given, like that has to be done. But also the fact that media coverage comes in at this point. And one thing that I'm curious about, that when violence breaks out in the Northeast, the media, especially the Western media, I think, would you agree that it frames it as a simplistic majority versus minority or a religious war?
Of course it does. Of course it
Yeah.
does. There's no question about it, and that's the most banal, the most simplistic way of looking at it. But it's not because they're not bright, it's not because they're not intelligent, it's because it's agenda driven. And that is something we should be very crystal clear about. It's not that they don't understand this region or this region is too complex for them. Sure, it's a complex region because it's not one state, it's many states. It has very interesting cultures, traditions, indigenous governance, administrative models. It is peppered with legacy issues as well. Sure, all of that is there. But when Western media covers it in terms of just conflict and not the kind of development that it has seen over the past decade, then I don't think you need to be, a genius to come to the conclusion that it's agenda driven. Where Indian media is concerned, I think Indian media has changed its stance towards the Northeast. There is a lot more focus, and that focus, see everything. What is the media? The media is reflective of what the people want. So, because it has become interesting to your to civilians, to your local populations, it has become interesting to the media, and the media coverage has improved. Of course, it can improve further, and I'm sure it'll continue to do so. It's they need to have their regional headquarters there. They need to have permanent people working there, and that needs to be fruitful for them as well, which means that we need to start reading news about the Northeast, because if readership increases, if interest in the Northeast increases, the stories will increase. It's a cycle. The only thing I'd be really wary about is stories romanticizing, militants, ethnic armed groups, agenda driven local bodies. So I think what I would really, really just be, uh, wary about is romanticizing any of this and positioning it as a freedom struggle, which more often than not it isn't. It's more an agenda against the state driven by multiple actors that may be not from India. And I do hope that I do hope that the supremacy of the state prevails in the Northeast, and that people shudder at the thought of doing anything illegal, indulging in any sort of illicit economy out of fear of repercussions. That is the only way that we can keep our borders secure, and the only way that we can encourage development and keep our people in the Northeast safe.
Thank you so much for that insightful conversation and also for setting certain perspectives right. Thank you for the conversation with the Global Order, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Swareena, for having me.